afternoon and good day everybody, David here, and in today's video we're going to be revisiting the old build video that I've done, focusing on Iron Man. But now, in good old Tony Stark fashion, I've come up with a Mark II version. So this is the Mark II Repulsor build. Now if you haven't seen the previous video, here's a link to it. A card should be on screen now. Now I recommend watching that video, however it's not completely necessary to watch it because many of the gear pieces and etc have changed for this video. So I'll be recommending new combos, there's new gear pieces and new ways to play Iron Man. But as I said, certain parts of the skill tree mainly have stayed the same, so if you want the full experience please check out the previous video as well. But without further ado, let's jump into this Mark II version. So as you can see, my stats have improved dramatically. I'm still focusing on precision mainly because that improves our range attacks. However, after playing the game a lot more, I prefer having a balance between sort of might, precision, proficiency and valor. So therefore our melee attacks and our crit chance and crit damage are all fairly high. I also like having a high resilience now, so our defense for this Iron Man is a lot better. We also have perks on our armor, which you'll see in a minute, that help improve our range, resilience and damage output. Now on our melee gauntlets, we have a 43% chance light combo finishes granted defense buff. We also have light signature attacks deal cryo damage, so this is better. I much prefer having light signature attacks than I do to the previous version, which was the light combo, and also a 13% increased damage to all of our weapons. So another gear piece that I have that I really like is this gamma one here that gives gamma damage to both our light combo finishes and our light signature attacks. So I use this during Tachyon Rift missions because of the 20% increased damage perk as well. But the main takeaway is the light signature attacks and a negative status effect, because that's what we're going to be incorporating into our playstyle as well. Now for our range attacks, we have this filthy piece which provides PIM particle damage to both our repulsors and our missiles, and then also a 13% increased stun damage during cloning lab missions, but that perk doesn't matter. So having PIM particle damage on 2 of our 3 weapons is great because it helps with our damage output and synergizes really well with some perks we'll see later on. Another gear piece that I really liked was this one that gives us plasma damage to our repulsors and also a defense and invulnerability buff. So if you want to go for more survivability and even more defense, so if your defense rating wasn't as high, you could go for a piece like this. However, I'm going to be focusing on having my damage as much as possible because my defense rating is already pretty high. I also know that you can get a gear piece that has plasma damage for both your repulsors and your missiles, so plasma or PIM are both very good options to have. Now our chest piece, this gives us our damage buffs, so a 17% chance of getting a damage buff from just taking damage, which is absolutely incredible. Just getting hit means that we're almost 20% chance of getting a damage buff with every single hit that we receive. There's also a 60% chance from reviving teammates that will get a damage buff, so that's also very much welcomed. Basically, damage buffs are key to getting big numbers, so they're a must in this build. And if you don't have them on your chest piece, make sure you have them on another armor piece. Another good option is this armor piece that gives you a Jarvis barrier perk. So this is great for getting your defense up again. Also the 30% increased evade distance is also a really good perk option. But again, damage buffs are much more preferred, so that's where we're going to be focusing on. Now the reactor piece is just sick. I get a 18% chance that defeating opponents gives you a Tachyon Surge buff. Now the Tachyon Surge buff boosts your status damage by 50%. This is an incredible buff and it stacks with the damage buffs that are on our chest piece. We also then have a 20% increase on all particle damage. so that works with both our repulsors and rockets. And finally, a 18% faster charge time on our unibeam. This piece of armor is just awesome, and I believe I got this drop from the Tachyon Rift missions. I just finished that mission with 100% rating, and there's a chance of getting a armor drop with this perk on it. Another good option, if you're prioritizing your Hulkbuster, a piece like this that gives you more damage as the Hulkbuster and a faster cooldown on it, as well as an overall faster cooldown across all your abilities whilst you are overcharged. So just like our old Iron Man build, we're going to be focusing on being overcharged as much as possible and using our heavy combo finishes for our repulsors as much as possible. So both of these options are great, but the benefits of the one that I've got equipped are just ridiculous. Now for the major artifact, I've gone with the Tacticon because this works really well with the build, as you get another 12.3% increased damage on people affected by status, as well as a 12.3% increase to all status damage. So again, this synergizes just really well with our other perks on our armor. We then have a faster ultimate cooldown and increased critical hit chance for our light finishes on our minor artifact, and also a 12% increase to our heavy combo damage. So across all the armor pieces and the artifacts, there's just so much synergy going on. We've got different damage buffs all stacking on top of each other and stacking on top of our already high base precision damage. And then the perks in the skill tree also stack on top of this. As I said, like in the previous video, we'll be doing a load of heavy combos with the repulsors and overcharging ourselves in every engagement possible. They will mainly be using the missiles for high burst damage or applying the PIM shrink effect a lot easier. Now our skill tree hasn't changed too much from the previous video, so obviously we've unlocked all the base attacks. For the support heroic, I'm still using the arc field, creating the bubble that protects you whilst you're inside it. I've also gone with the arc jolt, so I can revive teammates instantly and protect them whilst they resurrect. The defensive field is also a good option for just reflecting projectiles back at enemies. I prefer having the single fire unibeam that I can fire longer, and I pair that with creating heroic orbs when you defeat enemies with the unibeam. And you'll see when we cover the unibeam later on how I go about using it actually in combat. But another good option is the concentrated fire for just high single target damage if you prefer using it that way. Also the Omega Beam is still a very good option, again if you just want high damage output in a short amount of time. Now for the Hulkbuster, I've gone for hyper coils, so increasing the deployment for 10 more seconds. Then I've paired this with the Magno Missile Barrage, so we just get more missiles per barrage. But again, I'll cover the Hulkbuster later on because we use it in a slightly different way than before. So again, using the combo finisher mastery because we want increased damage on our heavy combos. So that's going to be our bread and butter of this build. Make heroic orbs for doing takedowns. This is going to be the same option across all our characters. And increasing our range attack damage by 15%. So this will stack with our other buffs that we've got on our armor. So now we've chosen rocket mastery, so this increases our damage for all rocket attacks by 12%. This is so we can do high burst damage with our missiles if we have to. I've paired this with the targeting guidance system for the rockets, so when you're aiming down sights and you're firing rockets, it's a bit more forgiving with the aim. You don't have to be exactly on target because they will sort of auto aim for you. So this is great for just spamming rockets and not having to focus on lining up the perfect shot every time. But again, we've kept the repulsor efficiency because I love the repulsors for Iron Man, and it's going to be my main damage output unless we're going against bigger, tankier enemies. So because this is going to be the bread and butter of the build, I want to be able to fire more repulsors. Then we've got the arc reactor capacity, so just increasing our maximum amount of supercharge energy we have. I believe this is the same as what we had before. The overcharge duration boost, so again just increasing the amount of overcharge that we have and how long we can stay in it for, and the overcharged damage boost, so doing more damage whilst overcharged, and again stacking with all of our other damage buffs that we have. Now I believe this is a new one compared to our last build. Energized Pulse adds shock damage to the Energy Pulse ability. So again, I'll cover later on in this video exactly how we will use this in combat, but this does count as a shock status effect. Then we've got Empowering Barrier. It generates intrinsic energy for 5% every second for all heroes that are near the energy barrier. This is great for filling up your teammates' intrinsic bar as well. And like before, the Air Superiority, 15% damage boost on range attacks whilst flying. This is fantastic for when you're flying into combat with your repulsors, just doing incredible crit damage. Now when using the energy barrier, I always just fly in amongst all the enemies and pop it, hitting as many people as I can. It acts as a sort of debuff in a way. Because it electrifies enemies and adds shock damage, it applies that negative status effect. Now because we've got the positive pin damage now on our repulsors and missiles, this is great for flying in, debuffing your enemies, overcharging you, making you do extra damage, and then you are claiming the exploit damage with your stacking the pin particle on top of the shocked enemies. So this is just a fantastic way of doing huge damage with Iron Man and laying down an area that you and your teammates can all sit in and be safe, just doing high damage output. So this also works well with the Unibeam because it gives the Unibeam extra damage whilst you're inside the area as well. And it also works hand in hand with the Tachyon buff that we've got on our armor, and also the Tacticon major artifact bonus that we get, but they all go hand in hand. Of course we still have the old way of overcharging ourselves on will with the energy barrier technique. If you're interested in learning more how this energy barrier works, I'll cover that in more detail in my older video. Now the Unibeam, I like to use it as a more of an ad clearing method now. So killing multiple enemies with the long single fire Unibeam, creating orbs, which in turn gives me my arc overload back. But the Unibeam also does incredible single target damage still, and if you proc it with a damage buff, it does even more ridiculous damage, so it really does cover both ends. The Hulkbuster, as well as the missiles being great for ad clearing and single target damage. I also love using it as a get out jail free card, as it heals you when you spawn it in. I really do just use it as a way of making sure I don't lose a star when I'm trying to get 100% on a mission. But a sort of new move that I've discovered with the Hulkbuster is if you click and hold melee button, you do a super fast constant punch and it applies really good stun damage to targets. So this is great for just chaining takedowns with the Hulkbuster. So this is actually better against single target enemies because the Hulkbuster lasts longer, and then you can still use your micro missiles when the bar is about to expire. Now we're going to talk more specifically about how I use this new version of Iron Man. The reason I prefer the signature attack is because it's really easy to do straight off. It doesn't take much setup time, unlike the light combo finisher. So his signature attack is when he slams down into the ground. You can see here we apply the cryo effect as soon as we hit the enemy. And you do that just by clicking and holding the melee button whilst you are in the air. And if you knock them into the air again afterwards, because of the cryo effect, they end up falling super slowly, so this is really good for setting up combos. So your repulsors will then do exploit damage, so you can chain them into your repulsors or your missiles, or you can chain them into just more melee attacks. or into a charged repulsor. It's great against groups of enemies, so you can knock people in the air, and when you slam down it'll affect multiple enemies, so not just one. And you don't have to be flying to do it, you can just jump once and click and hold X and it will still count as a signature attack. But this is really good, like I said, for applying status effects really easily. And then you can chain your missiles into it as well now, because we've got pim damage on our repulsors and our missiles. A good thing to note is if you charge up the missiles, they do a exploit damage on like impact, and then some more exploit damage on the explosion as well. So against smaller enemies, you're better off just hitting them just with the impact of the rocket, which will kill them and do huge damage. But against bigger single target enemies, I like to charge the rockets up because it applies pim particle damage a lot easier. And then this also works with the arc overload, so again, adding shock damage to people, getting exploit damage on your repulsors and your missiles. And then because of the energy pulse perk that we had in the skill tree earlier, by countering an enemy, you can also apply shock damage to them. So then this also chains into exploit damage for your repulsors. One thing that I've discovered making this video, and is not stated in the skill tree, is that Iron Man's lasers do inherent plasma damage. So along with the inherent shock damage that his arc overload does, and the shock damage that the energy pulse attack now does, just like our Thor build that we covered on this channel, we're covering so many of the status effects that are in the game. We've got cryo on our signature attacks, we've got shock on our arc overload and energy pulse attacks, pim particle on our repulsors and missiles, and then we've also now got plasma on our laser attacks. All of our weapons now do different status effects, and they're all positive status effects. So this stacks so well with setting up combos and the way that we use Iron Man. Just the amount of damage you can output with him now is just ridiculous. A couple things to note: with the lasers, for some reason it doesn't register the plasma damage if you are aiming down sights and holding it on a target. So the best way to use it is to use it as a heavy combo finisher, so clicking the Y button and setting up lasers mid combo. And you can see here there's so many different variations of combos that you can use. Knocking people up in the air and then finishing them with lasers whilst you're in the air. Knocking them up in the air, hitting them with repulsors. Knocking them up in the air, hitting them with missiles. Slamming down on the ground, chaining into lasers. Slamming down into the ground, into your missiles. There's just so many different combo variations that now all do exploit damage. It's just insane. Another thing to note is with big single target enemies, so like this tank here, if you hit them with your signature attack first and then use your missiles, you'll see it doesn't apply the cryo effect very well, or as effectively. So the better method to do it is to actually charge up your missiles first, hit them with loads of the pim damage. This not only applies the pim effect, but it will also shrink the enemy, making them do less damage and take more damage. And then apply the cryo effect signature attack afterwards, therefore getting the full exploit damage. And then you can chain that into a finisher really easily then, because you'll already be in close quarters. Another interesting thing I found was after proccing the Tachyon Surge perk, it seems that your next status attack, if it's a crit, will do exploit damage regardless. So you can see here, I repulsor this first enemy, proccing the Tachyon Surge buff. And then the second enemy, who is affected by pim damage already, I shoot them with my repulsors, which is still just pim damage, so it shouldn't stack, it shouldn't do exploit damage at all, but yet when I hit the crit spot it comes up with the green exploit damage numbers. So this Tachyon Surge perk really is the next level, giving you a 50% damage increase is an insane amount. And again, this all stacks with the rest of the build, so you can see in this clip I've got my damage buff, I activate the Tactigun major artifact, I then proc my arc overload field, overcharging myself and be buffing my enemies. I then just go to town with my repulsors doing ridiculous amounts of exploit damage, and my lasers doing plasma damage as well. Like, this build just works so well together and so seamlessly. You don't have to overthink anything or take too long to like set anything up, because it just works flawlessly. To sort of summarize, if we can, the Mark II version of this repulsor build far exceeds the Mark I version, having shock, cryo, plasma and pim particle damage covered just in this one character is insane. All the damage buffs and status damage buffs that complement each other and stack on top of each other just by taking damage, or by finishing enemies, or by setting up an easy signature attack followed by a weapon range attack. Like I said, everything just works hand in hand, and the damage output that Iron Man now has is ridiculous. And you want to be able to just fly in, use your signature attacks to apply cryo to as many enemies as possible, and finish them off with your repulsors and your missiles or lasers, using the heavy combo as much as possible. I recommend not using the heavy combo with your missiles just because it drinks so much of your intrinsic bar away, but instead aiming down sights and firing your missiles that way. And then when you've got your arc overload, you can overcharge yourself, place yourself right in the middle of the enemies and just go to town with any of your weapons. Then create heroic orbs for yourself by clearing a load of enemies with your unibeam. You can overcharge yourself at will using your energy barrier, and if you somehow do get weak, even though you've got all these defense buffs and all these ridiculous damage output methods, you just call in your Hulkbuster for that free health bump. Then just go to town with your missiles, or just decking a single target in the face. This build really is a lot of fun to use, but if you try it out, let me know how you get on and if you enjoy it as well. That should do it for the video, guys. If you've enjoyed it, a like is very much appreciated, and if you haven't done already, feel free to subscribe. Helps the channel out and also lets you guys know whenever I upload a new video. If you want to join my community, I do stream here on YouTube. I stream every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. Make sure you click the notification bell to know when I'm live. And until next time, my friends, take care, stay safe, keep up the grind, and I shall hopefully see you all very soon. Bye bye.
Nice work. This sends a message to AIM. We're coming for them. And their backup plans. Damn straight.
We've done everything we can here. I'm telling my people to head back.